Yeah, hi, good morning. Kelvin Mackenzie here. Look, this Labour government, I am massively hostile to. I think they hate people, possibly like you, anybody who really just wants to get on with their lives, make a few pennies, and then leave it to their family. They are number one on the list. And what they're saying is, we don't mind you making money, but then we want to take it off you and want to give it to somebody else's family, right? So that's fairly aggravating, that, to my mind. And actually having this, rather well named by Mike Graham, actually, instead of King of the North, Knob of the North, that cheered me up no end. Something that doesn't cheer me up is that Lisa Nandy, Secretary of State for Pies, is now saying that they plan to give prominence to, they're going to force the tech businesses, I don't know how this is going to work, to give prominence to trusted news providers. Now, the whole reason why organizations like this, why little companies like this started, was because people don't trust the current news organizations. So, for instance, take the BBC. The issue there is that they have, it's like politics. You know what they say about politics? Politics is you have the right, when you get into power, to choose where you put your money. It's the same in news organizations. They choose. So the BBC, they'll have an agenda. It might be, I don't know, could be pro-migrant, could be pro-Labour, could be pro-somebody. What you can be absolutely sure is it won't be pro-reform, it won't be pro-restore, and actually won't be pro anybody around about the middle. They choose items which reinforce the prejudice of their employees. Okay? In a funny way, we do the same thing. We do the same thing, but we're not funded by the taxpayer, nor are we funded actually by anybody except anybody daft enough, including me, Pooch, and Mike Graham, who joins me now, to invest in this crackpot scheme, which almost certainly will one day end up with us all begging for more money from some unsuspecting person, probably outside the country. But that having been said, I am so hostile to this. The idea that, so that when you go online, you're going to have thrown at you Channel 4, right? Well, why is Channel 4's audience completely collapsed? Nobody wants that left-wing crap, right? The BBC, right? The BBC are just about to lay off hundreds of journos. Why? Nobody wants their version of events from yesterday. So, you know, if there's a revolution in the Congo, which I don't give a stuff about, it'll have coverage. Why? Because somebody from the left has got in or something has happened. I don't want to be told why HS2 is either a winner or a loser. I want to know what's happened to my money and why it hasn't worked, but I don't want to see the politics of it all, which rather favors the left rather than the right or something, right? I'm not sure how this system works. Lisa Nandy thinks, in the same way as that rather obscure minister in Mahmoud's Home Secretaryship thinks, that if she puts forward this idea, there will be some dim northerner in the shape of Andy Burnham thinking, oh, she's come up with a good idea. We're going to be able to progress our agenda, right? So she's starting to say this, that, and the other, all big news, hoping she gets Burnham's eye, because, of course, she's a Wigan MP herself. So the issue is, how is this going to work? You know, are Facebook going to be forced to cover issues that they wouldn't cover normally? Or when the audience show a big interest in this, will it immediately be? So a big interest, for instance, joining me now, Mike Graham, big interest in what Mike Graham says. They're saying, oh, we can't have that. Whoa. We better show what the BBC are showing about a similar subject. Honestly, is that where this Labour government, after just 2 damn years, has got to? where they can't take the heat of the criticism, and therefore what they have to do is look upon their media partners, right? People who force you to pay 180 odd quid to watch them, right? And if you don't pay it, by the way, we'll send you to jail, right? They're now going to say, if you don't listen to it and watch it, we also think of sending you to jail. So not only are you going to have to pay for it, you face another prospect. How is that possible? And what will happen to the news agenda generally? Are we all going to go around spouting the old nonsense that comes up at 6 or 10 o'clock? Look, I quite like radio news, right? Okay? I quite like the radio news, and I would be happy to pay for that. Actually, I would be happy to pay for that subscription because I want that access to it. Yeah, I quite like the way they do it. I don't want to have it jammed at me. I want to be able to make the decision myself. And if we get into a situation where effectively the government is forcing you to swallow the news agenda, which they decide because they decide how the BBC is funded. If they turned around to the BBC and said, no, actually, scrapping the 180 quid, we'll pay by subscription. If you like it, you can have it. If you don't, right? That would be fine. But it's not like that. They sit down every few years or so and say, we're going to continue with this kind of policy or we're not going to. Therefore, they are controlling the news. You can't imagine the BBC turning around and saying the Labour government are bloody useless when at any minute now they're going to decide whether they're going to have an increase in their licence fee or not, which in turn is going to decide what news coverage there could be. Remember, news is a choice. By the way, I've worked for News UK, right? You know, some pretty decent journos in there, but there's some stories that you cover and there's some stories you don't, okay? They choose. Then, of course, the difference is if you're publishing The Sun or The Times or something, you can either pay for it or you don't pay for it. The BBC, you don't get a choice. Channel 4 decided that they were going to go down a different route. This is a dangerous moment, and I would like to see, and I'm sure it'll happen, the Tories reform, restore, even the Greens come out and say, this is a step too far. Lisa Nandy, by the way, a complete idiot. Her dad was quite clever, ran the Running Mead Trust, right? The brains, honestly, fell a long way from the tree. So that's my view. If you don't agree, please turn off the TV, close your laptop immediately and decide what's right. Mike, good morning.
Very good morning to you. I think they rather enjoyed that, actually. I think you're very much getting into your stride. I mean, you and I could walk into the BBC today, right, and save them an absolute fortune. You know, they're sacking 550 journos, right? Yeah. That's only the tip of the iceberg. You might find this hard to believe. I once did a show for about a month or two for BBC Scotland after I got fired from one of my other jobs, right? And
can I ask you under what circumstances you got hired by BBC Scotland?
Because I was, at that time, I was doing this show called The Independent Republic of Mike Graham on Talk 107.
Good idea.
Which was a great show, very successful, run by Bill Ridley.
Uncle Bill.
Uncle Bill, and bought, in fact, by you as Dunedin FM, I think it was.
Yeah, I know. Right? It was one of my less successful financial ventures.
Unfortunately, a gentleman called Callum Macaulay was also involved, and he, of course, pitched it wrong to the advertisers and said this station is so brilliant that it will make 10% of the audience in Edinburgh, and of course it didn't. It took 5%, which is fine.
Yeah, pretty good.
LBC takes 5%. Yeah. So they all wanted their money back because they were like, well, you didn't get 10%, so they never made any money. I was bizarrely made. I was so successful they made me program director.
And managing director, effectively.
Yeah, and I was then accused later by Scott Thornton of wasting $5 million of the company's money, and I was like, no, that wasn't me, that was Macaulay. I didn't do any of that. Anyway, so they decided it was too expensive, so they pushed me out. And before I moved down to London to work for Talk Sport, I got this gig, and it was a Sunday show for an hour, political show. We had 4 guests,
right?
A woman, and I was assigned a producer from Tuesday, right? So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, just working on my show. She would go out and start recording interviews with people, set up a couple of things. When I went in on the Sunday to do the show, and bear in mind, I'd had one producer at Talk 107. There was 7 people there, right? One was just taking emails and bringing them into me. Another one was making the tea. Another one was taking phone calls. And the woman producer said to me, "Do you think you'll be all right with, being able to talk?" I said, "I used to do a 3-hour show on my own. You've got the cost of thousands, and that's the problem."
Well, they would have hated that. They would have hated that aspect of the conversation.
Yeah.
Because they knew. Anybody who works for the BBC, they know. I did actually do something for Radio 4 once.
Right.
And actually, to give the credit to that lady, right, that producer, she did a shift, that lady.
Yeah. I'm sure they've got some decent people.
I think you're 100% right.